Across civilizations and centuries, one symbol has quietly echoed through temples, rituals, and secret doctrines. A simple, solid shape with infinite meaning. The Black Cube. It stands still, yet speaks volumes. Not in words, but in resonance. In the silent weight it casts on the collective soul. How did such a geometric form become the ultimate emblem of limitation and the silent invitation to spiritual awakening? What is it about this black, featureless object that draws the eyes of mystics, theologians, and seekers alike? From the ancient rites of Babylon, where Saturn was feared as the devourer of time, to the tefillin of Judaism worn during sacred prayer, to the Kaaba at the heart of Islam's holiest ritual, the cube returns again and again, anchored at the crossroads of the divine and the tangible. But its presence doesn't end there. In the shadows of modern esoteric societies, in the designs of secret architecture, even in the grids of digital control, it lingers, calling not to the intellect but to the part of us that senses more than it sees. This is not merely history, it is a summons, a whisper from within the structure itself, urging you to ask, what lies beyond the cube? And who are you inside it? Saturn is more than a planet. In the mythic imagination, he is time personified, the sovereign of sequence, the governor of decay, the force that draws all things back into silence. He is the cycle that births and buries, the breath between becoming and undoing. His presence is in the wrinkles of skin, the crumbling of stone, the inevitability of autumn after bloom. In ancient lore, he appears as Kronos, the devourer of his own offspring. A terrifying image, yes, but also a revelation. Time consumes what it creates. The future is born only to be digested by the present. This myth is not cruelty. It is law, the sacred rhythm that binds everything in mortality's grip. What is conceived must be confined. What lives must yield to the cycle. And yet the symbolism deepens. Saturn's essence is not only death but design. He is the architect of duration, the one who takes chaos and sculpts it into order, not for comfort but for growth. His tool is not simply the scythe that reaps but the cube that defines. The Black Cube is Saturn crystallized. It is time-made structure, matter-given geometry, a fixed point in a world that otherwise flows. It represents the architecture of limitation, what resists, what confines, what defines. It is the sacred architecture of endings. You'll find echoes of this cube not only in mythology but in temples, in rituals, in cities, and in the boxes we build for our thoughts and roles. The cube is the container of culture, of law, of identity. It stabilizes but also suffocates. It offers safety while asking a price. Your fluidity, your change, your wild, unbound essence. From the scythe to the cube, Saturn's symbols speak one truth in many tongues. What is cut down becomes contained. What is free is eventually formed. And in that formation, we meet our greatest challenge, not to escape the shape, but to understand what it was made to hold. The cube is the bone structure of reality. It does not deceive, it reveals. It forces us to confront the limits we've accepted and the identities we've adopted. In spiritual terms, the cube marks the place where form meets resistance, where energy, once spiraling and infinite, agrees to become something singular, defined, constrained. It is the descent of spirit into matter, the agreement of the soul to experience the slow passage of time, the compression of light into density. And yet within this density lies a secret. The cube is not punishment, it is process. It does not seal you off from the divine, it teaches you the discipline to return to it. Saturn does not oppose enlightenment, he tests its worth. To meet Saturn, to face the black cube, is to stare into the geometry of your own limitations and ask, what have I built out of fear? What corners of myself have I boxed and buried, simply because structure felt safer than surrender? This is where the myth becomes mirror. Saturn, in his harshness, is the gatekeeper of truth. The black cube is his question, not his answer. And those who dare to enter it will not find imprisonment, but initiation. Across religions, across centuries, the black cube emerges not as artifact, but as axis. In Judaism, it is worn on the forehead and arm, small, leather-bound square, called the tefillin. In Islam, it is monumental, central, circumambulated, known as the Kaaba. Both are cubes, both are sacred. Both stand at the intersection between human devotion and divine architecture. In their form, they are nearly identical. Black, perfect in proportion, silent in message. But their roles extend far beyond their physicality. They function as anchors, touch points between what is above and what is below, between the unseen and the daily. In their silence, they speak the language of return, to the center, to the law, to the one. Pilgrims circle the Kaaba in endless motion, turning clockwise, body after body, year after year. But this is not chaos, it is cosmic choreography. Their rotation echoes the orbit of Saturn, the far-seeing sentinel of time. Each step taken is a ritual echo of planetary movement, of celestial mechanics made flesh. But here, a paradox appears. If the cube is sacred, is it also a boundary? If the path is a circle, is it also a loop? Is the ritual a liberation or a repetition? This is where spiritual inquiry begins to deepen. The cube in this light is not merely a symbol of devotion. It becomes a reflection of spiritual inertia, the very human tendency to confuse movement with meaning. In every step around the Kaaba, there is reverence, but there may also be resignation. The ritual is ancient, but is it awake? Saturn, whose orbit is echoed in the sacred walk, is the planet of karma, repetition, limitation. He is not concerned with comfort, but with consequence. So it is no coincidence that these cubes, both Tefillin and Kaaba, invite repetition, focus, structure. They are Saturnian in nature. Holy, yes, but also binding. This does not diminish their value. Quite the opposite. It magnifies the responsibility of the practitioner. For these rituals are not performances. They are mirrors. What is your orbit around the sacred? Are you circling the divine or circling your own habits? Are you repeating out of reverence or out of conditioning? The cube, as a symbol, forces this confrontation. It cannot be escaped. Its form is immutable, but your relationship to it is not, and therein lies the opening. The cube teaches not by changing, it teaches by remaining. Its stillness reveals your motion. Its silence reflects your noise. In its constancy, it becomes a portal, not to a God outside, but to a center within. Thus, the cube is not merely a site of faith. It is a test of attention, a call to awaken in the middle of the familiar, to walk the circle, not as one who follows, but as one who sees, and to ask with honesty and courage, is this a ritual of presence or of sleepwalking? Only then can the cube become what it was always meant to be, a threshold, not a cage, a beginning, not a loop, a geometry of reconnection. In Gnostic cosmology, the material world is not the pinnacle of creation, but its shadow. It is a counterfeit dimension, constructed by a lesser god, a demiurge, who, in his ignorance or arrogance, mistook himself for the source. What we call reality in this view is a layered illusion, not evil in itself, but binding. It seduces with sensation, distracts with form, and traps with structure. And at the center of this illusion stands the black cube. This cube is not just a shape, it is a state, a compression of divine essence into geometry, a cage built not from iron but from belief. It defines edges, it imposes corners. It says, this is where you begin and that is where you end. And the soul, vast, formless, infinite, learns to shrink itself to fit. To the Gnostic, the cube is a perfect emblem of this spiritual confinement. It is the prison of matter, the spatial anchor of the soul's forgetfulness. Every surface reflects a limitation, identity, time, mortality, fear. And yet, not all saw it as damnation. For the alchemist, this same cube becomes the crucible, the furnace where transformation is not only possible but inevitable. What imprisons the soul also refines it. What binds can also burn away the false. In this view, suffering is not failure, it is fuel. Pain is not punishment, it is purification. The crucible does not ask for belief, it demands presence. Fire will not negotiate, it simply reveals what is real. And so the cube becomes sacred, not in its ability to contain, but in its capacity to transmute. Within it, the ego is not merely trapped, it is cooked, pressurized, dissolved. In the language of alchemy, this is calcination, the burning away of the fixed self, the brittle mask, the story we've mistaken for truth. And only in this burning can gold be revealed. Not the gold of currency, but the gold of consciousness, of awakened perception. The great secret, hidden in plain sight, is this: the cube does not hold you. You hold yourself within the cube. And that realization is the first crack in the wall. To walk the path of the alchemist is to stay within the fire long enough to see through the illusion, to remain still in the center of confinement until the confinement speaks. And when it does, it says something like this: you were never just matter, you were always the spark. So what is the cube? A cage or a forge? The answer is not in the symbol, it's in your relationship to it. If you resist it, it confines you. If you surrender to it, it breaks you. But if you understand it, it frees you. This is the paradox of the black cube. It is both the weight and the wings, the test and the teacher, the box and the opening. And your soul, if it dares, can walk straight through. At the edges of spiritual inquiry lies a figure often misunderstood, misnamed and maligned: Satan. But before the red-horned demon, before medieval fear, before fire and brimstone, there was Saturn, the slowest of the visible planets, the keeper of time, the enforcer of structure. And over centuries, this cold and distant force was refracted into something darker, more personal, not just a planet but a presence, not just a lawgiver but an accuser. Saturn became Satan, not in name alone but in meaning, he who limits, he who binds, he who delays, he who insists on the cost of every choice. And in that transformation, the cube, once a vessel of form and focus, hardened into something else, a prison for the soul's perception. The black cube in this context is more than symbolic, it is architectural. It is the mental, emotional, and spiritual framework within which modern consciousness is shaped. Rigid, predictable, enclosed, it is structure without fluidity, order without wonder, a fortress of repetition masquerading as progress. To cling to the cube is to cling to control, to certainty, to ego. And yet, paradoxically, the tighter we grip, the more we drift from truth, because the soul by nature is formless, expansive, infinite, and the cube by design is not. The cube doesn't lie, but it also doesn't breathe. And in that breathless space, the soul forgets its skybound nature. It trades vision for safety, eternity for identity, lightness for laws, but there is a crack in the structure. It comes not from outside, but from within, a subtle trembling beneath the surface, an unease that grows with time. It speaks in questions you were taught not to ask. Why am I afraid of stillness? Why do I fear death? Why does time feel like pressure rather than presence? These are not distractions. They are doorways. For the fear of death is not fear of endings, but fear of dissolution, the loss of self, of control, of the box you've built. To meet that fear is to see through the cube. And to see through the cube is to see Saturn not as Satan, but as shadow. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is not evil. It is unacknowledged. The traits we disown become the forces that control us. The cube in this light becomes not a demon's dwelling, but the projection of our own repressed fears. Our fear of change, our fear of chaos, our fear of freedom. What we do not face, we live inside. And so long as the cube remains unconscious, it shapes the very framework of our lives. Not because it must, but because we let it. To reclaim sovereignty, we must not destroy the cube. We must illuminate it, walk its edges, map its dimensions, understand its purpose. Only then can it become transparent. Only then can it become optional. Satan, then, is not a figure to be feared, but a function to be studied. The distillation of every place where we resist impermanence. He is the echo of Saturn's lesson, that true freedom does not come from avoiding limits, but from transcending their illusion. And the black cube, it remains, as a reminder, as a mirror, as a question. Will you live inside the structure, or remember that you built it? Beneath the polished floors and solemn rituals of esoteric orders lies a symbol rarely spoken aloud, yet quietly placed at the center of their initiations, the black cube. In Freemasonry, this symbol is not merely aesthetic. It is functional. It is the vote of rejection, the silent no passed in secrecy. But its rejection is not personal, it is metaphysical. The black cube is a spiritual checkpoint, a test embedded in silence. Within these occult systems, symbolism is not decoration. It is architecture for consciousness. Every symbol is a lock, and every initiate is a key in training. The Black Cube is one of the oldest, one of the most difficult to unlock, not because it hides knowledge, but because it reveals what you are not yet ready to accept. To be presented with the cube is to be presented with your limits, not theoretical limits, but energetic ones, your assumptions, your attachments, your unconscious resistance to change. In that moment, the cube asks, are you willing to die to who you think you are? But these initiations are not confined to temples or rites. The cube has expanded. It has multiplied. It now exists, hidden in plain sight, embedded in the very fabric of modern systems. In databases, in algorithms, in surveillance grids, in the digital infrastructures that shape our choices, guide our behavior, and interpret our desires. The cube has become code. No longer merely geometric, it is now procedural, invisible but deeply felt. It organizes the flow of information, the structure of attention, the frequency of thought. Its function remains Saturnian: order, control, separation, approval, or denial. And once again, it filters access, not to knowledge, but to freedom. Are we living inside a ritual? Has the entire digital ecosystem become an initiatory maze designed not to free us, but to test us? In ancient systems, only the initiate who could see through the symbol, not just obey it, would rise to the next level. Perhaps nothing has changed, only the architecture. What if the Freemasons' Black Cube now lives inside your phone? What if the spiritual test is disguised as convenience? What if the digital cube, your feed, your identity, your preferences, is the new gatekeeper of evolution? The hidden orders never cared for belief. They cared for readiness. And the Black Cube has always been a tool of distinction. Who is awake and who is still in orbit? To engage with the cube is not to oppose it. It is to decode it. To recognize that its structure reflects your structure. Its limits mirror your mindset. Its silence matches your own unanswered questions. It is here that the cube becomes luminous, not in light, but in meaning. It is no longer just a vote, a structure, or a system. It is a mirror of consciousness. It asks not only who you are, but who you are becoming. So ask yourself, is the cube rejecting you, or are you rejecting the part of yourself that would step beyond it? The Black Cube is more than a symbol, it is a reflection. It does not show us the world as it is, but the world as we have chosen to perceive it. And often, what it reflects is not our truth, but our persona. The mask we wear, the name we answer to, the identity we cling to in a world that demands certainty. In psychological terms, this is the false self, the construct shaped by expectation, fear, conditioning. Carl Jung called it the persona, and though it protects us, it also blinds us. It is the face we present to the world while the soul quietly waits behind the curtain. And over time, we forget the waiting. The cube in this context becomes the perfect metaphor for this self-forgetting. It is stable, defined, unmoving, everything the ego strives to be. But what is stability if it's built on repression? What is identity if it requires you to exile your shadow? The shadow, as Jung described, is not evil. It is unintegrated. It is the part of ourselves we refuse to see. Our fear, our shame, our rage, our vulnerability. We don't kill it, we bury it. But what is buried never disappears. It waits. And from the darkness, it shapes our lives silently. The more tightly we grip our persona, the more violently the shadow pushes back. And the cube becomes a cage, not because it has walls, but because we refuse to see beyond them. To recognize the cube is not an intellectual insight. It is an energetic awakening. It's that sudden stillness in the middle of motion. That uncomfortable moment when the mirror stops showing others and starts showing you. Not your face, your pattern. You begin to see where you've been living on repeat, where your reactions aren't responses but habits, where your truth has been replaced by survival. And in that moment, you realize something radical. The cube was never external. You built it, brick by belief, corner by fear. This is not a cause for despair. It is the beginning of freedom. Because what is built can be unbuilt. What is unconscious can be illuminated. And what was once a prison can become a portal. To confront your shadow is to reclaim your energy. To loosen your grip on ego is to discover the space where your soul can breathe again. The cube remains, but it softens. It reveals its edges not as punishment, but as invitation. Will you keep wearing the face that fits the world? Or will you remove it and meet the world from the inside out? The cube is not your enemy. It is your mirror. It doesn't punish. It reflects. And when you are willing to look, truly look, it becomes not the shape that defines you, but the silence that reveals you. The black cube was never meant to be shattered. It was meant to be understood, because what we resist persists, and what we face transforms. Like a puzzle unfolding into a cross, the cube reveals its hidden nature, not as confinement but as crucible, not as end but as passage. It is the shape of discipline, yes, but also the form from which grace emerges. Every edge, every limit, every invisible wall was placed not to block you, but to beckon you inward. Each resistance is a teacher, each structure a question, and within every form lies the seed of its opposite. The cube contains not only density, it hides direction. To transcend the cube is not to escape form, but to bring awareness into it. To move through it, not by breaking its rules, but by transcending their meaning. Because true freedom does not come from destruction, it comes from depth. And so the journey beyond the cube is not rebellion, it is return to that which was never boxed, never named, never broken. It is the return to your essential self, unbound by time, untouched by story, unshaped by fear. The cube was only ever the mirror. The awakening is yours.